As most of you know, I'm Kristen Kloppenstein, the Interim Director of the UT Dallas ERC and Texas School Project, and welcome to our monthly seminar. And today we will be hearing from Stella Flores, who is Assistant Professor at Vanderbilt University, and she does her work using the UCD Education Research Center data on a Joint Advisory Board approved project. And this is a Gates-funded study studying the intersection between race and higher ed, right?
Yeah,
higher ed access. And before she went to Vanderbilt, she worked at the General Accountability Office, the GAO, and was a program specialist for the Economic Development Administration of the Department of Commerce. So she got her EDD in Administration Planning and Social Policy Higher Ed from Harvard. I'm learning all sorts of stuff about you. And so please join me in welcoming Stella.
Thank you, everybody. A couple of things. First of all, apparently I'm not as tall as I need to be to stand behind the podium, so I'll be moving back and forth. It's not the first time it's happened, if you can believe that. Second, I am a Texan. I'm from Edinburgh, Texas, the Rio Grande Valley. I always like to say that. And my former economics professor is in the audience from the LBJ school, so hello to Chris King. So that suddenly made me nervous when Katie told me you were coming.
Grades you turned in.
Yeah, I passed. But it's great to be here. I want to thank also my key and primary research assistant, Toby Park, who's in the audience, who's part of this research. Also my other RA, Amanda Ochoa, both PhD students at Vanderbilt University. So could not have done this without their assistance. As many of you know, if we use ERC data, we have to do it here. So we've spent a lot of time traveling from Nashville to come here and have tried to be as efficient as possible. So these are two projects. They're in the working stages right now, near completion of analysis, and we should have working papers by the summer. So welcome suggestions as I move forward. Okay. Let's see. I'm doing this. Today, how am I going to handle this? I want to talk to you a little bit about the goals of the project of the UTD-ERC data. The first one is college access across different policy periods with a focus on underrepresented students, so that's Black and Latino here in Texas. And then understanding the college completion gap, which is the second study by race and ethnicity. I'm going to do a lot of this by showing you maps. I love maps, and Mark Liu from the UTD-ERC, who's in the audience, helped me construct some maps on some of these data, so we're very excited about showing those. I believe in the use of maps of getting people's attention fast, right? And you see exactly what population is affected by what policy, or at least influenced by a certain policy. So you'll see that. And we'll also divide it into economic regions in Texas, right? Because the local labor markets surrounding the post-secondary institutions, it's going to be very different, Corpus Christi versus Dallas, right? South Texas versus Upper North Texas. So you'll see a little bit of that. And then finally end with some implications and necessary questions. What does this mean? The beauty of the data, right, is that we can get students from high school and track them into college and into completion. So because of that, one of my messages here today is to think about what's the K through 12 contribution in thinking about what influences college completion, right? So I'm on the higher ed side often, many times, and we look back and say, K through 12, it's your fault, you're not preparing the students. K through 12 will look at us and say, it's your fault, you're not preparing the teachers. So I would like to get into that discussion and think about how the data can give us some ideas on how to move forward. And again, this is one of, to me, I'm a data person, so this is one of Texas' most awesome resources, these resource centers. So I hope that they continue long into the future. Okay, I'm not used to this Mac, so. All right, so I talked about a little bit about the two projects. Let me just give a little shout out to the third project I'm working on, which is the college trajectories of English language learner students. That's forthcoming. I should have results next fall as well. Okay. guys see these? All right, great. So I want to give you just early snapshot. What are we dealing with in terms of participation? This is census data. So I guess there's no red button here, no light button. Okay. You'll see it beginning. Is there an increase in participation using the CPS data? There, you see some bumps along the road in this left side of participation, but overall you do see an increase. And there, certain factors influencing the ups and downs, but overall you can see an increase. What I want to put your attention to is the completion graph, right? So we see an increase of white completion of BA degrees from 75 to 2,000, even among the black population. Hispanic population, stagnant, except for this period right here. I'd love to see a study of what's going on here that we see a sudden increase, but it never crosses 10%, according to these numbers. This is a problem, right? And so this is part of why we need to explore why. Okay, why Texas? Texas is an excellent place for a case study because of the infusion of all this higher education policy, mostly from state legislatures, but some from institutions, and then from the federal government. So I've highlighted key policy periods here that we've identified, and obviously there are more things happening. But in terms of access to college, one of the primary ones being the top 10% plan. 2001, we saw an infusion of financial aid and in-state tuition for undocumented residents. Students, and then 2003 we see tuition deregulation that has kind of continued to expand, and then we saw the reinstitution of the use of race in affirmative action, but this is an institutional choice. So for selective schools, UT Austin chose to implement the use of race in college admissions, but Texas A&M did not, right? So even though the Supreme Court said it's allowable, institutional autonomy is a key part of the story of access and completion. Finally, 2006, 2008, we've got the official dual credit and other curricular changes. So I note these because these are things that we considered in our models as we move through the various cohorts. What are we talking about here? Just another quick graph. We're starting with high school curriculum, or pre-college characteristics as we like to call it. What policy period? What transitions might be occurring? Do you enroll in college? And what kind of college? This is important in Texas because you have a very diverse landscape. We have many HSIs and a good number of HBCUs.
Define those.
Okay. Hispanic serving institutions. Who knows what that is?
Hey now. Stella.
We're in Texas, you should know. Okay. Hispanic serving institutions they're federally defined. You can apply to have HSI status. It's about a 25% enrollment of Hispanic students. And part of that enrollment also has to be low income. So in Texas, we have a lot, and guess what? They're based on region. So you have quite a few in South Texas, in West Texas, or the El Paso area. And then the major metro areas, Houston and Dallas. Most HSIs are community colleges, okay? HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. There's a decent landscape in terms of numbers in Texas. They're mostly in East Texas or Southeast Texas, where the Houston area is, in the Gulf region. So some are public, some are private, same for HSI, and then traditional, which is basically your typical four-year public university. Doesn't have these designations, so to speak. And then college completion. We're missing a lot here in terms of what we know matters. So this data set will allow us to dig into what comprises a gap, if it does exist, and I'll show you what we've done so far. Okay, this is the data in case many of you in the audience are very familiar with it. The cohorts we chose were 97, 2000, 02, 06, 08, all chosen for specific policy periods as we define them. We're working with high school graduates, so we do capture them in 12th grade, and we look back to 10th grade to their coursework to see what they've taken, but our beginning sample starts with high school graduates. Paco Martibel, who's here a couple of months ago, noted the importance of starting with the high school graduate pool in terms of enrolling in college. So that was some nice reaffirming evidence that we heard using this data a couple months ago. And to answer our questions, we use logistic and multinomial logistic regression. Our basic outcomes: do you enroll in college? immediately after high school, already noting if we're only talking about, this is worth noting, students who enroll immediately after high school, what does that mean? So it's a pretty traditional population, right? And but this is, because of the way the data set is structured, we thought this was a good way to start.
Stella, do you capture immediately being the first year, or just the fall, summer, fall?
First fall after
Okay.
the May graduation. Okay, then we look at where they go, the type of college, and then to examine our college completion gap. If it does exist by race, we use an analytic technique called decomposition analysis, and we look at the contribution of the individual characteristics, high school curriculum, post-secondary institutional characteristics. So is it that you're poor? Does that matter more than where you went to college? Or does whether you had a good high school curriculum, such as taking trigonometry or APIB, does that matter more than your individual characteristics? So these are descriptive analysis. I should note they're not causal. From these, we're in the process of designing something with more causal inference. Okay, so project 1, into what type of institutions do underrepresented minorities enroll over time, accounting for a range of pre-college characteristics across different periods, and then what curriculum interventions seem to matter most. Previous work on this that we noted to build the rationale for our design. The importance of this work is that it accounts for pre-college characteristics not seen in other college access work because of the beauty of the data to the extent possible, and then links to national data sets. So we brought in characteristics about the high school, about the post-secondary institutions, and then also about county unemployment rates and the wage data when that was appropriate that Texas has. The second study on college completion, what factors explain the racial and ethnic achievement gap in college completion? What factors matter most? So again, was it the individual, context, curriculum, or the post-secondary school? This is work we also used to build the models. And why is this work important? There's been some really nice decomposition work coming out of Lovenheim, Sarah Turner, and John Bound. They focus on class. While this is not the exact analysis, we focus on race, and it's, to our knowledge, one of the first studies to do it in this way. So these are the variables. Again, people who know the ERC data can welcome to offer suggestions or the things we might consider as we move through the results. So we have individual, high school curriculum, context, geographic region. Isaac McFarland was kind enough to share his distance data. So we look at whether living within 10 miles of a post-secondary institution, in this case it's not the individual, but whether the high school is within 10 miles of the post-secondary institution, whether that matters. And then in terms of thinking about quality factors of institutional context, we use percent students who require developmental or remediation, the selectivity of the institution, the percent of faculty that's on the tenure track or tenured. We have the student-faculty ratio, and then size, so enrollment of the institution. So you ready to see some maps? Right? Oh, sorry, Texas. All right. What we have here, this is census data. It's a map I constructed with the help of our GIS librarian a couple years ago. But what you see here is the percent of age 18 to 24, the percent that is non-white, non-Asian in the United States. So age 18 to 24, what do we see here? It's the southern basis of the United States with this population. Now, in terms of state policies that have been documented to some extent, at least to influence college access in some way, or research that's out there about these state policies, I mapped out in-state resident tuition for undocumented students. So the stars are the ISRT policies. Merit aid, right? Texas has an ISRT policy, but not a formal merit aid as the other states with the blue dots. is there an affirmative action ban in your state? So that's California, Washington, Nebraska. So for the affirmative action ban, Texas has been, it's a tricky one, right? Because it's lifted based on institutional decision. And then do you have a percent plan? And then do you have a ban on bilingual education? So this is sort of the territory that we're dealing with in terms of Texas in comparison to other states. Okay, so here are the ERC data maps. I wanted to look at, I'm interested in hotspots in Texas in terms of where are your pool of high school graduates. This may seem intuitive, but at least we have numbers now on our map. And so what are the hotspots, so to speak? Houston and Dallas being the two largest districts of Hispanic high school graduates. So these are your eligible traditional high school for graduates for college. We've got areas in the Valley, Laredo, El Paso, and scattered in some school districts. The bounds are school districts. This is what we're looking at in terms of Hispanic. What do you think the black high school graduate map looks like?
Dallas and Houston in East Texas.
So it's an East Texas phenomenon with the black high school graduates and Dallas. The HBCUs, all in this area, right? HSIs, wherever you see Hispanics. So here's your pool of black high school graduates. Now, I was interested in knowing where of the high school graduates Hispanic high school graduates that do enroll in college as the percentage of all four-year enrollees, where are they in the state? And this is where we bring up economic region to account for the sort of environmental context issues. Here you have percent of Hispanic four-year public enrollees of all four-year public enrollees in 2008. This is, I can barely see here, it's about 10.9, I believe, right here in South Texas. Followed by Gulf Coast. Then we've got Alamo and Metroplex. This is four-year enrollees, remember. So the infrastructure of four-year is going to matter here. Okay?
It's interesting that Alamo is behind the Gulf Coast to me. Because UTSA is an HSI, isn't it?
So the question here is, of the Hispanic high school graduates in the San Antonio area, they're not enrolling in four-year schools as much as we might think they are.
Gotcha.
The denominator is
That's
those
right.
Hispanic,
That's right.
yeah.
Could you go back to the prior one just for a minute, the Hispanic one, actually?
That one?
What are those numbers over here, 0.82%?
Oh, I forgot to explain those. So I had Mark include where the location of four-year public universities were. So that's the blue dot. And where the location of two-year public are. And those are the red. So you see an expansion of community college systems in these sort of rural areas out here, right? And obviously it's Houston and Dallas are the biggest systems. Then San Antonio, Dallas is the biggest. And you actually, and the ones in the Valley have expanded considerably, but I think the first community college in formal one wasn't really built in the Valley until 1996. So it's a area that just recently got the community college infrastructure.
And these are the share of Hispanic high school graduates that are attending college? Or
No, these are just high school graduates.
So even down in the Valley, for example, only 0.82% of the high school graduates are Hispanic?
Of all high school graduates, of the percent that are, yep,
Maybe
by school district.
Almost all those students in those areas down there are Hispanic. I mean, it's 96 or 98% Hispanic or something in those, as far as San Juan, Alamo, and et cetera. So that just the numbers seem off, that's all.
Okay,
Might be
so
a decimal place.
the denominator must,
Yeah.
how did we do this, Mark? I thought we double checked this, didn't we? We double checked this? Okay, I'll look at it again. So if the denominator is all high school graduates in the state.
Oh, in the state.
Oh, in the state.
This is the
Okay.
distribution of it,
Oh, okay, I got that.
right?
Okay,
That
yeah,
makes
so that's why the
I got
decimal
it.
points are small.
There you go.
that's all community colleges in 4 years pegged out there?
In 2008.
Wow, so there are huge distances. That's really informative, thank you.
Of course, there are no people out in most.
Cows,
Armadillos.
armadillos and cows.
Cow College.
Part of it is the concentration. Some earlier work I did at Harvard on whether on HSI community college funding looked at where they were located in respect to where Hispanics lived.
Yeah.
And part of it was that there just weren't enough community colleges in areas where there are Hispanics.
Right,
So that was the argument for that paper.
that's really interesting.
Here you see it's gotten better,
But
but
there's still a spatial mismatch.
mhm. Okay, so we got the black, same thing. The decimal points are small because it's the denominator. We've got the 4-year enrollees, went through that. Let's look at the 2-year enrollees for Hispanics. We still see a high enrollment. Again, it has to do with the concentration of Hispanics in the 2-year schools. But what jumps up, what you can't see here, is the Metroplex suddenly jumps up to almost 6%. So of all 2-year enrollees, Hispanics go in greater numbers in South Texas and Metroplex. Dallas, I think it's the community college infrastructure. It's
Yeah,
pretty massive compared to
supply or
others.
demand, right? That's what I'm thinking.
So something to say in terms of the future of 2-year enrollments as it relates to this area in the Metroplex. Gulf Coast is next with Houston. Okay, we're black students. This is 4-year enrollees. So the highest number being Gulf Coast and Dallas, or the Metroplex area, so it shouldn't be too surprising. Obviously, the Valley does not have a high black population, so it's almost zero there. But again, sort of an east to north Texas phenomenon. What about 2-year schools? So less so. I've heard this before, and this map kind of confirms this. Black students are less likely to go to 2-year schools in areas where there are a lot of HBCUs, and most HBCUs are 4-year colleges. So that's kind of what's happening there. All right, so let's get into some results to date. What are we seeing in terms of access outcomes and high school graduates by cohort status? So for simplicity's sake, red means bad, blue means positive or good in this case. And what we see in the odds of college enrollment, these are LoJet models. From 97 to 2008, the Hispanic odds of college enrollment have not done so well over time. It continues to be negative. So we were a little surprised considering we certainly see more Hispanics in higher education, but their odds of college enrollment controlling for these other factors are still not positive. Black students, on the other hand, we see a jump in 06 and 08. The other things we saw interesting in terms of the curriculum is we went back to see if a student took and passed an APIB course, whether they took and passed trigonometry. And this is sort of a signal of the arms race, right, in terms of mathematics. Before it was algebra, now and then algebra 2, and now we went to look at trigonometry. Math exit exam score, so the TOEIC score at that point in time, it was tossed for some folks because of the cohort. So the higher the math score, what are your odds of enrolling in college? And then participation in dual enrollment. Susan Brown, the assistant commissioner, asked us to take a special look at that. So we did, and we are very glad we did because we see that these odds are particularly high over time. Now, the legislation for official dual enrollment was in 2006. I don't think it was implemented until 2008. But it was pretty important even in the earlier cohorts. And then these geographic variables that we're interested in. do you go to high school in an urban area is consistently negative. Whether you worked in high school, we use the wage data. Important, then not important, then negative. So it's kind of it's sort of mixed, not a clear pattern here. County unemployment, the higher the unemployment, the more likely you are to enroll in college. And then distance seems to matter less in further years along. Okay. Yes?
Are these coefficients or marginal effects?
Are they what?
These are logit models.
Yeah, they're logit
They are
models.
coefficients or marginal effects?
They're coefficients, right? Or what are
They're
they?
coefficients.
You have odds on them. The odds are-
Oh, I did. Sorry about that.
And Stella, I'm sorry, I need to back that. High school within 10 miles of college is 2-year and 4-year?
Hmm.
Any institution?
It's any institution in this model.
And
Yeah.
the significant changes over time?
Yeah, with these preliminary.
Well, I suspect that's really affected by that dual enrollment variable, because you can only take dual enrollment if it's offered, and that requires it to be a community college, typically to be a community college locally. And so I'm not convinced that we're really disentangling those in a meaningful way yet, but that's really provocative, because I'm curious what the correlation is between participation in dual enrollment and being within 10 miles. And 10 miles is really close. Why, I mean,
I think we tried 10 and 20 or 10 and 15.
yeah, so I think there's some disentangling there to be done that might explain the funkiness because that doesn't make sense, I agree.
So the message here in what we saw to date was where infrastructure was important and being close to college used to be really important. With the onset of dual enrollment, that it changes the way your access is presented to you.
Except that you have to have it
That's
to
right.
have it.
I think it's just coming through in a different way once you've got the dual enrollment variable in it. That's taking some of the burden off of the location.
Mm-hmm.
Can you split that by 2-year and 4-year? That might
Yeah,
help
that's what I was
disentangle
thinking,
it.
right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, definitely, and I would go to 50 miles. Still arbitrary.
Yep. So there are different bands we can try with both of these.
And dual, how are you defining, or how are you calculating dual enrollment? Is you find
Well,
the same student in college
and
and
yeah,
high school,
so
or
we
you
went-
do it through courses?
Whether we found them in post-secondary courses.
Attending both at the same time?
Yes. So
If
the,
you do it that way, that's definitely proximity.
Sure.
Because there's ways we can do it in the course completion data where it flags dual enrollment courses, because some of them are remote, like remote TV.
okay,
So
we
you
didn't
don't have
look
to
that
be-
closely
Okay, we
yet.
should talk.
Okay, I didn't know that.
One other consideration too, I'm with the Richardson School District, we have a fair amount of AP dual credit overlay teachers, significant. And so the kiddos are in the dual credit scenario right there in high school.
Okay.
Right, that's, right, exactly. Because
Yeah.
that's an AP course that's also dual.
Yeah.
So when we look, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
thank you
So
for
they're
that.
not driving to community
Right.
college or.
They don't even have to be close to one.
Right.
And I think if I recall, when I looked at the legislation in 06, some AP courses would count as a form of dual enrollment as well. So this gets really muddy after here.
Well, they can all be dual credit overlay, provided the teacher is credentialed.
Okay,
It's, yeah, all 37 AP courses can be.
can they? Okay. All right, so then we've got some unpacking to do with APIB dual enrollment.
That's really provocative, that's cool.
So,
Not that I'm biased.
all right. Oh, basic. So what do we wanted to look at the role of math, so to speak. So what we have here, the dark is community college enrollment. The less dark, I guess, is 4-year, and the lightest is did not enroll. So as the math score goes up, all students show increased enrollment in higher education as basically as the math score increases. And what we did is we held the rest to their mean. But what we found interesting, so okay, math is a good signal for the higher the math, the more likely you are to go to a 4-year institution. And it's most stark with the Asian students. Where are they? So here we have white, Hispanic, black, and Asian. So you see this go up as a math score on the exit exam increases. This is 2008. Hispanics still show the largest proportion that don't enroll, or the highest propensity to not enroll in college at all. And these are Toby's graphs, so shout out to Toby. Okay. All right, so where are students going? Thinking about the minority serving institution sector. We've got HSIs, HBCUs, and traditional. I couldn't think of another appropriate name, open to suggestions. But each one is within the different sectors in terms of 2-year, 4-year private, and 4-year public. So these are the multinomial logistic results. Again, red means negative, blue means positive. So in more simpler terms, what is the minority serving institution in Texas? What is the story on that? Well, Hispanic students don't enroll in college, and they go to 2-year HSIs, then they go to 4-year HSIs. Black students go to 4-year public HBCUs, they go to 4-year private HBCUs second, or they go to 2-year HBCUs. There's one interesting institution in Texas that is both an HSI and an HBCU. Does anyone know about that? It's in San Antonio. So it's a real interesting case. Asian students go to 4-year public. Again, not surprising, but interesting to confirm with these contemporary data. Male students consistently across the board, coefficient is negative, and it's most pronounced in the 4-year private sector. Okay, so let's get into completion gap, because I'm running out of, or I want to leave time for questions. What contributes most to the gap? The individual, the high school context, the curriculum, or post-secondary institution. I want to start you with just some 6-year completion rates. This is for the over different cohorts. So the first cohort entered Texas public schools in 97, second 98, third 99, fourth 2001, and fifth 2002. We see here the students with the highest rates of the 6-year completion at 4-year schools, who started at a 4-year school, are Asian students, followed by white students, the purple diamond. Then we have we had a group of students who we identified as non-economically disadvantaged. So according to the TEA standards. So they're right under white students. When we've got black students, or Hispanic students being the red squares, so we see an increase over time. The green triangles are black students, so we see some shifting and then a lowering in the last cohort. The purple dot is economically disadvantaged students. You can't really see the LEP variable, or the LEP group, but it's got a shift back and forth. My caveat here is these are students who are identified as LEP in 12th grade. So the diversity of LEP students is actually quite ranged. So it's not really fair. If you're in 12th grade, you're already at LEP. I mean, you're not even likely to graduate. So this is a very particular kind of student. It's still pretty low. And then if we look at the HSIs, the orange line, how they're doing over time, and then the HBCUs. So I'm most concerned about this, because this is where most black students are likely to go and what they're looking at. Again, these are just descriptive, not...
So, I'm sorry, the 2 lines, so that's the graduation rate at 6 years for any student that entered in an HBCU?
Yes.
Okay, but wait. Did we have a previous one that showed that maybe it wasn't graduation, maybe it was enrollment, where we saw that the Hispanic rate was going down and the Black rate was going up.
That was enrollment.
That was enrollment. So we're seeing more Blacks enrolling, but fewer of them are graduating. So they're getting. I'm sorry. Am I stealing the punchline?
Kristen found has identified the punchline for the presentation. Yeah, hold on to that, Kristen. So, but you know, that's why she is who she is, because she's awesome. Okay. All right. So again, these are just descriptive. Let's get into the decomposition and I'll see what contributes what to the completion. First of all, is there a completion gap between white and Hispanic and white and Black? Current calculations say yes, and it's 15.5%. Sorry, I forgot I have to keep doing this. What does it look like? So in terms of unexplained, it's the top blue bar. We have the contribution of the post-secondary institution, its characteristics being purple, high school context being green, curriculum being red, and then individual characteristics. So then we control for fixed effects. It changes the graph a little bit. It gives, in terms of the post-secondary, but this is the contribution. If you think about it in terms of what's the pre-college contribution to the college completion gap, got it right here.
So just to help me, so this is the bundles of factors that are post-secondary or curriculum related or individual related, and the extent of the variance in that gap that's explained by those factors.
Of that 71%, these are the bundles that contribute to explaining that. So we still have a fair amount of unexplained here. Now, the thing about this data set, you know, it's a wonderful data set, but you can't get generational status and you can't get financial aid, right? The one that can be remedied is for the financial aid data. So that's my pitch for that.
We actually have survey data that gives us.
The percentile Texas only?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fantastic. So Stella, those post-secondary characteristics that you've got the fixed effects for, how do those map to your historical Black colleges and universities and your...
That's a good question. I mean, we don't have in there HBCU or non-HBCU, but we do have, I mean, it's a stretch, but you can stretch to say, if you want to, if most Black students are going to HBCUs, what part of that contribution of the institution is contributing to that completion gap? I don't know. Part of that is the HSIs too, obviously for Hispanics.
Because I mean, if I'm remembering from the earlier slides, it was percent of tenured faculty, and I'm not.
We didn't have whether you're an HBCU or not, but we had percent remediation. I can go back to that slide, but that's the next question, right? The sort of what's the question people might not want to ask? Is it the HBCU or not? I don't think that's a fair way to say that because it's about the way we're framing it here is institutional resources and other factors that might comprise quality.
And where is low-income school, low-income neighborhood? Is it context or individual?
This is context. Well, economic disadvantage is individual.
Okay, but low-income school, so predominantly economically disadvantaged school.
Percent minority in a school is in high school context.
So it's different than
It is
percent.
different. Being in a school that's overwhelmingly poor if you're a poor individual versus one that's not.
Yeah, I mean, that might be another variable to calculate in that way for context. But we want to make sure to calculate the individual wealth or lack of wealth. Okay.
This is free and reduced lunch.
Free and reduced lunch, yes. Okay. The white-black rate, the completion gap is 21.7%. It's higher than the white-Hispanic gap. And this graph we're struggling with because there's some interactions going on that over-explain the variance here. So what you see here is only 4 out of the 5 categories. But post-secondary is purple, again, high school context, green, curriculum taking a huge proportion, and then individual. When we control post-secondary effects, there's some over-explanation going on here that we need to look in deeper. Okay. So this is to give you just a better sense of the numbers of explaining the variance explained. Black-white gap, again, 21.7. What is it over time, over the various cohorts? Again, we find white-black completion rate increases over time. Kind of gets a little stagnant here, but still, while the white-Hispanic gap is lower for these cohorts examined. So,
Sorry, what's completion again? A 2-year college completion?
this is 4-year.
Just 4-year. Okay.
If we
So
get
it's
into
still-
2-year completion, that's way too complicated because we don't know the intent of the individual.
Okay. This is
So
all 4-year.
this is all 4-year. Now, Toby's dissertation is going to be looking at 2-year transfer to 4 years, so he'll have some results soon or in the next few months, right? Okay. So again, completion gap over time by a different rate. So the different races experience different gaps, perhaps for different reasons, and also it also closes with the white completion gap to some extent, obviously not a lot, for Hispanics, but not for blacks. So what does this mean? First of all, should college completion be the new universal goal for K through 20? So not just, right, post-secondary institutions. It's a question we're throwing out there. And why do we see differential effects by enrollment and completion by race and ethnicity? In terms of Hispanics, we know they stay close to home. We know they tend to go in terms of going to college, if they do go to college. So they stay in the state more. One hypothesis, and we don't know because we don't have the NESI data to merge in yet, but are we seeing an exodus of high-achieving black students? So we see increased enrollment of black students, but their completion rate suggests they're not as prepared. So 2 hypotheses we're throwing around. The unexplained, again, I mentioned the role of financial aid and generational status. And then so I leave you with these questions. How should post-secondary institutions close the college completion gap? What is the responsibility of K through 12? And who else needs to participate in this endeavor? So I'll stop there and happy to answer questions.
I think we should cut the Texas grants program and eliminate college counselors. That would go a long way, doesn't it?
I have a question. Yes. This is just the cohort data, right? So public colleges and universities in Texas. What's your sense of how many of the students you're focused on are actually going out of state or at private institutions? What's our slippage there?
I can only rely on other reports that we've seen in terms of most Texans stay in college, stay in Texas for college. So, you know.
I really don't have a sense of that number. Is it 80%, 85%?
It is.
I think it's between 80 and 90%, if not higher.
And it varies enormously by school district, obviously.
Yeah, but it's not, it's systematically related to ability, so that's the trick.
Ability measures. I think income.
Well, okay, yeah,
living
always.
state.
Yeah, it's a state that tends to stay in state more than others. And part of it is the size, part of it is, you know, the draw of the traditional universities. But it's a Texas game. If you look at, I've been in meetings that looked at where the high-achieving Hispanics go. It's like Princeton, Rice, Notre Dame. But most will stay in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
Yes.
Is there a difference in gender, the gender factor? Because you say, I mean,
We get that question a lot. We ran that. I can't remember. I'm not sure if we figured out whether those were good enough to display. So I'm going to say that's we can come back to you with that. The males are doing badly in general, especially males of color. So if we were to do the gap between black women and black men, right, that might look pretty stark as well. Any other questions?
So are you going to get financial aid? Is the FAFSA stuff?
I don't know. Is it available? That's sort of my next quest. You know, the issue with these data sets is like, if you have great financial aid data, you don't have great pre-college data, right? So here we have great pre-college data, but not financial aid. So it's kind of what it is right now. I think it would add tremendously. And all the aid studies, you know, well, not all the aid studies, but many of the aid studies suggest, you know, aid matters. So.
There's an interest, this should be an interesting ongoing study as well, I think, because colleges are now beginning to be rated on their completion rates.
Yeah.
And so if you could answer that question about how should post-secondary institutions close the college completion gap, that would, and completion rates by subgroup as well. And so that should be really, this is an apt topic to continue to work on.
And institutional capacity, right? Like what, I mean, if we find that over 50% of the gap is explained by even before you enter a college campus, like what does that mean? How should we, you know, rewrite those policy recommendations to account for that?
Have you played with the college ready variables at all?
I remember looking at them, they didn't look so well to me.
I mean, it's still kind of a work in progress.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the state has now, for your later cohorts at least, we've got definitions of what Texas considers college ready.
Yeah, but it uses tax.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not
careful
gonna
that
tell you
formula.
anything.
It's pretty.
I think it's junk.
We've looked a little bit at it.
Yeah, the ceiling effects are just tremendous.
The College Board just recently developed a new college ready benchmark formula that's, in my mind, much more accurate than what the state uses. So, I mean, the variables are tremendous. It shows us, College Board shows us in our district where our juniors are like 31% college ready, and in the state says, oh, it's 61%.
Right.
Come on,
Yeah.
Can you construct a college board measure from
Yeah, what are
ERC?
the components of it?
Oh, go to their website and just put in the search box, put college ready benchmarks, and there's a wonderful paper out there. Read something from Insomnia, it's great reading, but there's a wonderful paper that describes how they developed the benchmarks and how they're rolling them out. They rolled them out for SAT, PSAT, they just rolled out, and then their 8th grade ready steps is going to.
So part of that is what's the other side of the equation? You can be college ready, but it doesn't require that to enroll, right? So
are you going to get to the enrollment graduation gap that I brought up?
Well, that's pretty much it. What we see is the first bullet point, differential effects. We see black students are enrolling. They have higher enrollment rates over time, at least toward this part of the decade. We see consistently low enrollment rates for Hispanics, yet the completion rates are different, or at least the gap is somewhat more likely to be closed with Hispanics versus black students. So black students aren't graduating from college, but they're enrolling in college. Hispanic students aren't enrolling in college, but of those who do enroll, they're more likely to graduate. So it's an interesting story. I mean, that's...
Say more than that, though. What's going on?
What's going on?
What's going on? Why are they so different? And that gets to Kristen's point, is it the institutions? Is it something about the nature of the institutions? And is there something we can learn from that? Does it require a mixed method design? How do we dig into that?
Well, I've talked with a few HSI and HBCU scholars, and what they're saying, well, what I'm gleaming from that is the HSI status in Texas is pretty popular in terms of getting federal attention. You've got congressional leaders who advocate for them pretty powerfully. You do for the HBCUs as well, but I'm not sure that's coming from the Texas HBCUs. So what we end up with is this story of higher achieving than usual HSIs and lower achieving than usual HBCUs. Okay. Now, again, my results don't say that, but that's sort of the story. Yeah. And the reason we can say this is HSI HBCUs because the enrollment in these schools by minority students is pretty high.
Yeah.
And the landscape is there. It's taking in the students.
So it does beg for some field work.
It sure does.
So we did a study 16, 17 years ago, not on education, but on job training programs. And we looked to see after adjusting statistically, looking at long-term outcomes for employment earnings, where were those kind of above and below, several standard deviations off? And then we did kind of blind field work in 2 states to ask them what they thought accounted for their performance. And we got a really nice story about, and I think this would link in with Achieving the Dream and other things like that, where the ones who really were high performing ignored most of the tax and all that other kind of stuff that was the equivalent of job training. They focused on self-sufficiency, wages, high skill building, and things that made perfect sense, and wraparound services for their participants. And I think that would be a wonderful piece to do connected up with this.
The other part is, again, sort of, is the selectivity of the HSI versus HBCU. And in Texas, the more higher achieving HSIs, the more higher achieving HSIs are in Texas. Not the most high achieving HBCUs are in Texas. So that's the story we're going to dig into a little deeper.
Is this presentation available, this information available anywhere?
Maybe. We haven't released the papers yet, so that's why it's still working. But if you send me an email, we can talk about it. Excuse me, I'm tripping on my microphone. Let me put my contact. All right, great.
Thanks.
So thank you, Stella. That was great, and we look forward to seeing more of your work. Next month, we're going to have Charlie Plattfelter here from Duke talking about sports, big-time college sports in American universities. So it'll be a cool opportunity to hear a really top-notch scholar come talk about something that's very important to Texans in particular. And so if you are not on the distribution list and you would like to be informed of that seminar, please sign up outside the door. And is that in this room? That's in this room. Okay, great. So, and check our website for colleagues who couldn't make it today. The video of today will be posted in a couple of weeks. So keep checking that. And her slides will be posted, so you can take a look at the slides on our website and the events page. And thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Stella.